That was good. That was amazing. Great job. You did a great job. Amazing. I threw a curveball there at the end, and we'll talk about that later. But okay, couple good things, right? Like you have very good presence and polish. I don't know if you're nervous at all, but I couldn't really tell. Like you did a good job. So I think your pace, presence is there. I'm going to give you some constructive stuff, so it's more helpful for you. So first off, I would give an intro of yourself, right? Because I think it's important to understand enterprise sales is all about trust. So I want to trust you as a person, right? But you went straight into kind of like, which is still good. You went into like, I want to learn about your pains, which is great, but I want to make a human connection too. Like, who is Juan, right? Because I don't know him. On the other side, you should also ask like, who am I, right? You didn't really ask about that. And I kind of had to say, oh, I'm head of onboarding, but at a company like Square, right, the matrix of people is so deep that you need to start to piece together, okay, who is this person? How much power do they have? And what am I dealing with, right? Because then that tailors how you treat the rest of the conversation too, right? So that's up front. You did a really good job with building the pain. Like you were like asking a lot of great questions, I would say. Couple breadcrumbs I dropped, right? Were that, right now it's really manual. I'm looking to improve the speed, right, of delivering to our clients. A good question to ask her is like, how long have you been looking to solve for this, right? Because then that gives you a deeper understanding of, are they window shopping or have they talked to 3 of my competitors? And that's also another thing I would think about as a startup is who else are they thinking about? Because Square is probably not going to talk to one vendor and say, hey, like, let's go with this, right? So that's one thing. The other thing too is when you give the pitch, right, you talked about a lot of things, right? You talked about, I'm forgetting, I mean, you did mention the like time to reduce, but you talked about like 3 or 4 other things. Compelling, right? But it turned into a little bit of a long pitch where I was just listening, right? And then you ended, do you know how you ended the pitch? He said, does anybody know how he ended the pitch once he gave the pitch? He said, I'll stop there. Are there any questions? Right? And any questions typically is a dangerous question to ask. Typically, we do it as people when we know we've been talking for a while. We don't actually do it to ask a question, even though it's a question. Right? We do it because we're like, oh, I've been talking a lot. Like, there must be something there he has a question about.
Right? I'll show you. This is your transcription of talking time.
Yeah, maybe if you guys could see it, maybe we can pass it around too. But these like kind of like we do it because as founders, right, we want to show how extensive our product is, right? Because you want to be like, hey, like I don't know what they're gonna gravitate towards. I'm guessing that's kind of maybe what you're saying, and you don't want to leave anything on the table, because your product doesn't do one thing, right? It helps with like 20 things probably, right? But we have to, I think, like resist the urge to do that because you're not actually using what you did in the beginning about getting the pain to go deeper into your pitch. Because my biggest problem was the saving time, right? And so those are like my feedback points. Am I up for 5 minutes or should I keep going? But you did a great job. I'm just giving you the optimization, right? Like, by the way, like 99% of salespeople don't do this. So this is why I think like to stand out, you want to be the 1%, right? So I'm giving you the 1% stuff. And what it comes down to is like, how are you using what you did in the beginning to your advantage, right? And then let's end with the startup thing, because that comes up all the time, right? And after I asked that question, how long have you been a company for, I think is what I asked. Like, how long have you been around? That's the question, right? You didn't actually answer the question.
Yeah, the answer is not very good.
Well, that's what you think, right? But let's say hypothetically, you're like, I actually just started this 3 months ago, right? Let's say that's the truth. You should say that.
Really?
Yeah, because you need to be vetting the prospect as much as the prospect is vetting you. I'll give you a short story and then we could go out. At NBC Universal, my champion, at the end of a day when I had to meet all our executives and we gave this amazing pitch, I was like flying high, right? It was at Dropbox, we had a Michelin star chef. He was going into the elevator and I was trying to just relax, right? Small talk. His like car was outside, he was a VP of collaboration. His name's Lenny. He's like, Peter, I just have one final question. I'm like, oh boy. I'm like ready to get a drink, but this guy's trying to grill me, in the elevator. And he's like, who is your biggest customer today? And at the time at Dropbox, our biggest customer was National Geographic. There were 2,000 full-time employees. NBC Universal was 42,000 employees. It's like the 20th the size of NBC Universal. And Box, our main competitor, had closed a really big brand, General Electric, 100,000 full-time employees. They were like all over the news. Box closed General Electric. By the way, General Electric had a stake in NBC Universal. They were like investors. I think they owned like 49% of NBC Universal at the time, right? So I said, Lenny, our biggest customer is 2,000 employees, National Geographic, right? Like the use case is very similar because Saturday Night Live, NBC Olympics, all these guys are saying the same thing National Geographic photographers were saying, like they can't lose files. But our largest customer is 2,000 employees. So you would be our largest customer by like 20 times. So then, months later, we closed that deal, 42,000 licenses over 3 years. It was the biggest like multi-million-dollar deal. And Lenny came back and I took him to Korean barbecue a ton. Like, 'cause he didn't know about Korean barbecue until he met me. So like, we were like, okay, that's gonna be our thing, right? And he was like, Peter, like that moment, that was the right answer. Because I wanted to be the first patient and I wanted to be the first Fortune 500 logo on your site. So that is very, thank you, appreciate it. Anyway, so that was a critical thing, a lesson for me in sales, right? Yeah. Because sure, I could have said like, well, we have users at CBS, Disney, Turner Broadcasting, which is true, right? Like we had thousands of users here, but we didn't have an enterprise contract with them. Mm-hmm. And I could have said, hey, like we have companies like Disney using our product. What would have happened? First of all, Lenny would have known I was lying about contracts because then he could have asked like, okay, but do you have formal contracts with them? And then I would be like, kind of, sort of. That's like really bad. Mm. So the thing in sales is like when there's a hard question, how do you answer it, right? And if you answer it brutally honestly, the buyer knows, okay, I can trust this person. Nice, good job. Way to go. You did a great job. I could see a lot of the elements being injected into your pitch, which is awesome. So I'll start with the good and then get into some constructive stuff. Really good job with the intro. You established a lot of credibility because you said you were like in the consulting field for renewable energy. Is that right? Okay, that's awesome. So that was great. I think you got into the pain pretty quickly and started asking and followed the breadcrumbs. One thing I would do is, you did ask this question of like, how much is this costing you, which we talked about, right? Instead of saying that, I would actually accelerate to like, so if this is costing you a lot of pain, is there a budget for something like this, right? Just to like make the conversation flow faster because it could turn into like, hey, like I'm done talking to you, tell me what Permit Pal does, which I did. Right? Because I was like, okay, I see like there's all these questions. I already told you there's a pain, right? And so if you continue to, breadcrumbs is nuance, right? Because if you continue to rabbit hole too much, it also feels like, okay, like we're not getting to the actual root of what the product does. So that's where the art in the sale is, right? In the conversation. The other thing you did was whenever you assert off of an objection, right? It's really important to ask a question back. So there was like that main objection. Let's start with the last one. Like that's pretty hefty for a startup, right? And so you said, this is why we're pricing it, which was good, but then you should follow up with, I guess, like, why do you consider that hefty? Given it seems like you wasted, you said millions of dollars. Like, do you agree, this is actually like below market price right now? And to reiterate, we're only doing this for our first 10 customers. Is that going to be a problem, right? And then I would also ask like, hey, like, is it an issue that we've been around for 6 months? So that's the other thing is like when there's objections, you need to put the other person in the hot seat, because it's not it's not only your pitch, it's their pitch too. Like they need to actually prove to you why they deserve your time, right? I thought the objection around like there's already other permitting software was really good. Because instead of like answering that, you said like what other products are out there. That's really, really good. Because then you can tailor based off of what they're anchoring on. And if I had said something that actually existed, I actually did do some research, but I forgot the names, of course. Then you could say like, well, that one specifically is actually not purpose built for renewable energy, right? So I thought that was really, really good. And then, sorry, one more thing on the pricing is when you explain the price, you should explain why the price is the price. Because you explained it lightly. You said we're doing this for our first 10 customers, but you didn't include what is included in that, right? Like it's not just $50,000 for our first 10 customers. It's like my time, my co-founder's time, your fingerprints on the product, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, should we do the reverse pitch? Oh my God, I'm nervous. Yeah, let's take a look. You did that felt pretty conversational to me. I don't think very many monologues. So speaker 2 is nice, good job. Under 60%, very balanced. I don't know how long these are, but they're pretty good. I mean, I'm speaking for a long time actually, which is good. Giving a lot of context, which means you're asking good questions. So nicely done. Cool. Nice. You made it easy on me. Thanks, Emily. Good stuff. That was fun. That was really fun. No, yeah. You gave me a layup there. I appreciate it. Any thoughts? Then what I would say is like, okay, like typically I like to align at that level so there's no misunderstandings. But if you hold the decision and your COO like will just, do what you advise, then maybe should we include folks on your team, right? And so I still ask a question around like, I'm still basically telling her that I need to get the power, but I'm not like gating it on this like, oh, I need the COO. I'm glad you asked that because people get really offended if they're like, I just told you my boss doesn't need to be here. Why are you doing it? And it's because salespeople want to go into the pipeline meeting and say, oh yeah, I have a meeting with the COO. But that actually, sometimes that doesn't get the deal done, right? Especially if they're very cagey. So yeah, that's a very good question. It's just all about like, how are you getting to power? It doesn't necessarily have to be COO if the decision-making lies with Emily, or Peter. Yeah. Any other questions? Hopefully, did it sound natural when I was disqualifying? Like, did I sound aggressive? Hopefully not, right? And so that's part of what I was trying to show is like, you can ask hard-hitting questions, but not be aggressive. Just how you position it, right? Yeah, that's a great question. So the thing I think like I could have done is like sell my background and say like, hey, I out of all people understand that risk because I've been a renewable energy consultant. And I'm never going to tell you there's no risk. If any startup tells you there's no risk, they're not being truthful with you. But I'm personally invested in making this successful. That's also why though, like we should understand culturally if the company is ready for that. Because if you and I agree and we want to work together, that's great. But I also don't want to waste time if there's like a cultural political dynamic that's going to prevent us from really doing great work together. Right. So that's kind of how I'd say. So it's kind of like buy, but I'll say buy if I don't hear what I need to hear is kind of the mentality. And then if they're like, you know what, like, I think it's going to be really hard. I think it's going to be really, really hard to convince my COO. Then I would say, well, could I have a conversation with your COO? I don't want to overstep, but maybe there's something we can strategize on together to frame this in a way maybe I haven't done a good job framing. And then if they're like, no, then you're like, okay, well, it's great to talk to you. I'd love to stay connected on LinkedIn. We're going to have a vastly different product in 6 months. Could I reach out to you in 6 months? Then you put them in a list. And then once you hire marketing and sales, you're like, hey, I talked to this person 6 months ago. You should pay them a visit. Does that make sense? So it could be, a lot of lost deals turn into won deals. I've heard a lot of no's that come back. And they're like, Peter, actually, now I'm ready. But then it's easier because I've already had the discussion, right? And then, by the way, in that, there always should be a consequence for not moving forward. Like, that's totally fine, Peter, but I just want to be fully transparent. I know I said this, but just so we're crystal clear, like the $50,000 is not a price point we're going to have. So as long as you're okay with that trade-off, now I can't tell you what it could be, but this is like the impact is millions of dollars. So there's a world where this is going to be a lot more expensive because we believe in the premium nature of our product. But if you're okay with that, we can definitely put this on hold. Yeah, that was fun. Thanks, Al. You did a great job. Appreciate it. Yeah. Any questions? Just in general, right? Not about the pitch. Okay, cool. Yeah.
General question. I know we didn't cover this today, but do you have a kind of 1 minute recommendation of prospecting tech stack and how you would go about it doing it today?
Whoa. Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna rattle off some names that you can research, and then I'll kind of talk about 30 seconds of like my mentality for prospecting. So, you have you all heard of Clay.com? Yeah, Clay.com. I would look at Apollo.io. Have you looked at Clay.com? Does like auto enriching. Apollo.io is really interesting too. There are AI SDR tools out there as well, like Artisan, for example, is an example of that. But for those, I would make sure you get the messaging down first because they're good for scaling and volume versus actually like helping you frame the messaging, right? They do have tools around that, but I think you should like really hone that in manually first. In terms of concepts for outbounding, what I would think about is how are you, this is like hard, right, to execute on, but how are you different? I get a lot of questions. It's like, hey, Peter, is like the 15-day cadence standard? Like, should I ping them every 2 days? Should I do 2 days, 3 days? It's like, you're already behind the curve if you're asking that question, right? Because there's tons of emails coming into us that follow a framework. And so you need to cut through the noise, right? How do you cut through the noise? You don't pitch your product in the email. You don't say like, this is what we help with. You try and talk about a problem, right? And become a thought leader in that problem. Right? So you could, Emily, you could create a guide and you could create a guide around like, here are the top 5 things that you need to do to better manage your expenses as a contractor, right? That has nothing to do with what you do. I mean, it has something to do with what you do, but nothing to do with your product, right? It has something to do with solving a problem. Or it's like, hey, by the way, one of our customers, maybe like I said with the farmer, this is an outbound activity. You take a farmer and you're like, hey, do you have 10 other farmer friends who we can actually meet with? I will sponsor whatever lunch you want. And we could just talk about the challenges of farming, right? And no sales pitch, just getting people together. That's an outbound activity, right? If you're going to a conference, I'm a huge believer in conferences, but you don't just go to a conference and say, hey, are you going to be at the conference? Because everybody's doing that. There's like people, like every single startup is doing that. You activate a micro experience, right? You say, hey, I'm going to post up at this really fancy restaurant in Vegas from 9 to 6, go back and forth between prospect and customer. So your prospects are meeting your customers if you have them, and you're buying them drinks and food. And they're like, thank God, Juan, you invited me to this restaurant because I was getting so sick of the conference floor, right? So that's what I would think about. How are you providing value before you pitch to build that funnel and lead with that versus your product, and then activate in-person experiences that build trust? Yeah, Carla.
I gave Sal a really good background, but I'm not struggling to understand how I would respond to it.
Sure.
Said, well, it would take a lot for me to switch because I have I have like an in-house solution already.
Yeah.
Could you say what would you recommend?
You said it's OpenSmart, right? So what I would say is like, so is that a done deal that you're going to work with OpenSmart? Because you also mentioned you're like just interested in what's happening. And I just want to understand what this conversation is. Is it like we could get into a formal evaluation if you see something really compelling? Or is it a done deal that you're going to work with OpenSmart? Because they're a great team, by the way, but there's a lot of things they won't be able to do. But I also can't convince you if you're saying it's already a done deal. For all I know, you could already have a contract renewal that states that they're going to fix the things that we're talking about. It's like the whole, like, I don't want to waste my time, right? So that's what I would say. Yeah. Good catch on the breadcrumb. Yeah.
So Peter, what's your contact information? We'll send it out.
Yes. So if you find me on LinkedIn, that's the best place. I post a lot of content. They're very active. And then I have a YouTube channel, Peter on Sales, if you want to see some of the content that I put out to the world. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. This was so fun. Appreciate it. Thanks, Tyson. Honored to be here. This was fun. Thank you all.